I have always been very close to one of my friends, who is like a brother to me. Our friendship goes back more than 50 years, to the early 1970s. His name is James Strassel. I know him about as well as anyone I've encountered in my life, with the exception of my parents and my sister. We have shared many experiences, and through them I've grown to admire him for many good reasons. I could write a book on James, and I guarantee it would be very interesting. However, I am writing this piece about a true gentleman who I met over 50 years ago. Initially, it was only a strong acquaintance until about 18 months ago. That's when I started to become really close to Russ and his family. This relationship has helped fill a real void in my life. I am so thankful that we have become very close friends, with both of us pushing 80, he being closer than I by about 2.5 years. If there are two words that describe Russ, they are resilience and persistence. Russ and I are a paradox. We have several similarities, but we are very dissimilar in many key categories. Our fathers were both involved in World War II, mine in the European theater and his in the Pacific theater. I grew up in a single small town in southern Illinois. Russ grew up a military child living in Guam, Japan, a long stint in Germany, before finishing high school in Russellville, Arkansas. In our younger days, we were both exceptional athletes, Russ in baseball and bowling, I in tennis. Russ is musically talented, where my track record in music is pitiful at best. Russ was an accomplished drummer and member of a very successful rock and roll band. That experience almost took him in a completely different direction in his early life in the United States. According to him, somehow he managed to get himself through college and pharmacy school despite serious distractions like girls and rock and roll. Russ started out working in pharmacy, but deep down knew that would not be his future. In his early adult life, he had always had a passion for seafood and Cajun food. On several occasions, he seriously considered moving to the New Orleans area to experience and learn as much as he could about the local cuisine. This passion continued to grow and eventually drove him to be an entrepreneur and open his own restaurant that he named the S.O.B. This acronym stood for shrimp, oysters, and beer. When Russ and I first met, the S.O.B. was going gangbusters, despite a less than ideal location at Asher and University in South Little Rock. That area was in decline, especially when compared to West Little Rock. That area was really accelerating economically because of the completion of the interstate loop. It had been created with a multi-million-dollar bridge over the Arkansas River and the superb 430 internet section built north to south between Interstate 40, north of the river, and Interstate 30 on the south part of Little Rock. With a partner, Russ started a seafood buffet restaurant called the Spinnaker. The strength of these two restaurants was no food was ever frozen. In addition, Russ had developed a very light breading for his fried seafood and never allowed the frying oil to ever be overused. He had a passion for preparing all his menu items to be as heart-healthy as possible. Early on, he had wisely chosen a young lady to be his restaurant manager at the S.O.B. Together they built their initial restaurant to the point where it was time to secure a location on or near the Arkansas River. In the meantime, Russ and Kathy had fallen in love and started a family with two boys, Chris and Matt. Chris was born first, unfortunately with a defective heart that required multiple surgeries before he was 6. Matt was born a couple years later. Russ and Kathy were outstanding in their efforts to give Chris as good a life as possible. Even though Matt was younger than Chris, Matt grew into being a devoted big brother. Russ was convinced that involving his boys in tennis was one of those things that would provide positive outcomes and rewarding experiences for a father and his two sons. In my humble opinion, this was an outstanding directional decision totally made out of love. When Russ started explaining to me the experiences he had with his sons, particularly playing father and son tournaments, that information brought me much joy. It made me feel my passion for tennis, and passing that passion on to my students was being verified to the nth degree. Listening to Russ explain the pleasure he experienced with his involvement with his two sons in the game of tennis simply reinforced my dedication to the sport. Chris passed away in his 20s, living 5 or 6 years past what medical experts had predicted. Matt became a very good junior player, and most likely would have played college tennis except for the circumstances I'm about to go into that were way beyond his control. In my time on this planet, I have listened to a significant number of ministers deliver many meaningful sermons. One of those sermons is thoroughly embedded in my brain. The title was, "Everybody Will Be Broken." The message was, when everything's going well, it's easy to be a good Christian and treat others well and look after those souls who have not been blessed as much as thyself. However, what ultimately determines our character is how we handle adversity. That is where the broken part of the sermon comes in. By no means had Russ had an easy journey in life, but his positive outlook and raw talent had served him well. He was first faced with real adversity with his firstborn and the many surgeries Chris required. Russ and Kathy truly had stepped up to that challenge. Russ has been a wonderful husband to Kathy, and she has been a wonderful spouse to Russ. They have been fabulous parents to Chris and Matt. That alone easily deserves my respect, but they were to be tested in business several times over. Russ met a man named Melvin Bell, reportedly worth $50 million. Melvin was developing property on the Arkansas River just east of Interstate 30 running through downtown Little Rock. The timing was perfect for the Jefferson and their vision of a Cajun-style seafood restaurant on the river filled with live entertainment. The plan was live music as many as 3 or 4 nights a week. Melvin convinced him to be part of his master plan for this area along the Arkansas riverfront of Little Rock. This area now houses the Clinton Library, a multi-million-dollar investment on its own. Few small businesses can withstand what I call a black swan event. This is often a business deal gone terribly wrong. I am acutely aware of this myself, having started a tennis software business in the early 90s. For 3 years, my business was a negative cash flow, and the year it was going positive, I suffered a brain hemorrhage stroke in October of 1997. So I know the pain of losing a business after several years of effort, and most of your savings evaporates because of something outside your control. The stroke took away my ability to teach tennis to help pay the bills while I built the software business. This similarity with Russ brings neither one of us any joy. Unfortunately for Russ and his family, Mr. Bell turned out to be a con man, an unethical businessman, and basically an all-around scumbag. Russ not only lost his investment in the original S.O.B., Melvin cheated him out of over 100 acres of farmland that had served as collateral for this business venture. In current dollars, this loss would be close to $1 million. I have married 4 times but only to 3 women. Debbie and I divorced in 2001, a few years after I had my Black Swan event in 1997. We never fell out of love with each other, but it took 13 years to revive our relationship and remarry in 2014. My Black Swan event truly broke me with the eventual loss of Debbie and my businesses. Russ was much more resilient than I. So let's keep count. That's 2 Black Swan events for Russ and Kathy and their 2 boys. Russ and Kathy passed the first one with flying colors with the life that they gave their son Chris. Somehow they endured this second Black Swan event, moved out of Little Rock to Hot Springs, Arkansas after a couple startup misstepped restaurants. Eventually they were gaining success in this resort town, and along came Black Swan number 3. Russ had started a wholesale seafood business entity as well as the restaurant. In 2010, their supply chains to New Orleans were crushed by the BP oil spill in the Gulf. There simply was no way to recover from this devastating defeat. It broke Russ and Kathy's American dream of a successful chain of unique restaurants, and the wholesale businesses connected to them. So the question was asked, just how can a couple regroup in the face of such adversity? Russ had to make a faithful decision, for he knew his first responsibility is to provide for his family. He swallowed his pride and went back to pharmacy for 25 years of simply making the best of a very unjust world that had thrown some very difficult pitches at his life. He may have struck out in business, but as a father and husband he has hit multiple grand slams. He is the ultimate example of resilience and persistence. In my book, he is the man. It is the ultimate privilege to know this man and be his friend.